internship, which is part of your external IBL. Today is Wednesday, 10th July, and we're having a quick meeting from 1:30 to 2 o'clock to introduce the subject area of the internship. So this is what I wanted to explain, which is important to understand. You already know some things. You know that you can graduate this year because you're in fourth year, and this is your last unit. This unit is a minimum of 8 weeks, maximum of 12 weeks. So the recommended time frame is 12 weeks. But if you do 8, you can be assessed, given grades, so that it adds to your transcript and you can graduate. Now, this is July 10th. If you do 8 weeks from now, you end up on September 10th, which is just in time for you to finish and hand in your grades for the purpose of graduation. So it's good that we start now and we build up those 8 weeks. Even after the 10th of September, you can carry on with it until you finish the 12 weeks. And then, as I said, the opportunities to earn as an intern are there, but there's also opportunities to earn as a graduate intern. Once you finish your internship, you can still earn as an apprentice. An apprentice is just a next level of working that's above internship. Okay? You get a contract and you work on a project by project basis as an apprentice until you again prove yourself, and then you can get more longer contracts. You know, an apprentice contract is project based, but when you move beyond it, you can get a time based contract, like for 6 months or 3 months or whatever. But let's say 3 or 6 months. Let's say 6 months, and then you're working as an associate. You may do that for about 2-3 years, and once you're done with working as an associate, you graduate to the next level as a lead animator. Now, there you have more responsibility, more accountability, and again, it's a time-based contract, usually 1 year. So it can also be project-based, but generally time-based. And then, of course, it's a renewable contract. Beyond that, that's again 3 to 5 years. You work as a lead. You become experienced enough to be a director of an animation. So now you move and you work above these lead animators and you direct the animation. It's a kind of progression. So that's your learning path. And within that, there are various best practices, guidelines, and also advice that I would give you, or whoever you're working under would give you within that journey. Okay? And that way you build your career. To get to director of animation or even a producer of animation can take up to 10 years in a normal progression, about 10 years from this moment on. But in the process, you're earning, you're learning, and you're also building your reputation as an animator. And you get exposed to different projects, sometimes in different countries, and you might even end up working in a completely different context. But that now is based on the decisions you make along your learning path. So in some ways, your working starts now as an apprentice, as an intern. Okay. Now, what would be required now is that you work under supervision. That supervision is usually coming from someone that's referred to as a trainer. So that person trains you on what you need to do in order to deliver on the work. The kind of training you learn in internship is continuous but different from what you learn in school. I'll tell you the differences, at least the 3 main differences. The first one is to do with the kind of skill set you need to have. What you learned in school is in play, so it's acceptable. That knowledge you have in interactive media design in all the 4 areas you covered, all that is in play. The only thing that you need to be aware of is that when you're working in an internship position, you need to apply your skills to a team context. You have to produce what you're doing with a team, a bit like you are doing in internal IBL. You have to work within groups, within a team context, as well as working individually. So you work by yourself independently, but you also work within a team context in an interdependent sort of working relationship. That's a requirement. So you see, when you're working in a team, then or in a group, the issue that is of concern is that your group is performing and you're contributing to that performance. Um, because money is involved, you find that the company can't afford to have non-performing groups. Groups must be performing, and the members of the groups must be contributing to the performance of the group. Otherwise, the group has to be reconstituted into a performing unit. It has to perform. Perform simply means you have to deliver on the items. And there are only three things of concern in delivery. Only three. One is that you're on budget. Whatever you do is within the budget of the production of whatever task you're doing. Number two is that what you're doing is on time. It has to be on time, but we'll discuss time later. Number three is that what you're doing has to be on message. So you have to understand the message and then deliver it on message. Those are the only three items that are ever of concern when you're working within a work context in animation. All right? You need to be on budget, on message, and on time. Those three things. So I said I'll discuss time with you. Let me discuss it in a general way. Time is not out of context. Everything here is in context. Time is not looked at so much as something that is fixed. You see, we're in an African context. So we're not looking at time as an object, it's fixed, it never changes. And we have to align ourselves to this thing that is never changing. For example, in everywhere else in the world, 12 o'clock or 12 p.m. means 12 p.m. It's never changing. From the work point of view, it doesn't change. So if you have to do something by 12 p.m. on, let's say, Wednesday and deliver it by 12 p.m., that time in the rest of the world never changes. If our client is from other parts of the world where their understanding of time is this object that never changes, then we, as the ones who are commissioned by the client, would have to fit into that culture and produce the work according to the time that the client is asking for within the client's culture. Okay, that's in the West, for example, but it's the same in the East. But most of our clients are in Kenya, and Kenyans don't look at time that way. We don't look at time as a fixed truth. We don't. We look at what we call timeliness. Timeliness is the synchronization of resources, not the synchronization of activities with a fixed object of time. We don't look at it that way. We look at the synchronization of resources with each other. For example, if we say we're meeting, like you say, I called you for a meeting at 1 p.m. Now we ended up meeting at 1:30 p.m. In an African context, we are on time. Why? Because we're not looking at time as fixed. We're looking at time as the synchronization of objects of value. In this case, when I'm meeting with you, I'm meeting, you see, the resources of value are the human resources, yourself and myself. So when we're both ready, when we're both here, that's when the meeting starts. And there's nothing there that has gone off. Nothing there is wrong. It's okay because of the way we look at time. It's the same thing when we deliver our services. So if you're going to produce something, you must produce that thing which is on point and on budget. You have to produce that which is on point and on budget. If the time comes, Wednesday, 12 o'clock, and you've produced it on time and on budget, then it's okay. You produce it by 12 o'clock because that's what we had said in the beginning. But if 12 o'clock comes and we find that you have produced something that is, let's say, not on point and it exceeds the budget, then from our purposes, from our production point of view, you've not produced anything. You have to produce something that is in budget and on message. If it's not, then you have not produced that thing. That means even if you come with it at 12 o'clock, you have not produced something that we can say is timely. We need something to be produced that's on budget and on message at a time that we can say you have done it. If that time is 1 o'clock, then the time of delivery becomes 1 o'clock. If the time is 3 o'clock, the time of delivery becomes 3 o'clock. Now, in such a scenario, the time is moving. You can see it's no longer 12, suddenly it's 1. It's no longer 1, suddenly it's 3. Okay? So we're looking at the synchronization of all three things in a way that we can say it's on time. All right? So the time is determined by the products you're producing, and they must converge at the time that we are saying is acceptable. If it's 3 o'clock, then that's the delivery time. If it's 6 o'clock today, then that's the time. Okay? But timeliness doesn't mean that the time is moving randomly. It also doesn't mean that we are not disciplined in a way that we look at time. It's far from the truth. In fact, it requires you to be more responsible about time than anything. What you have to do, you see, if you look at time as fixed, then you say, okay, by 12 o'clock, I'm supposed to produce something, right? What you produce by 12 o'clock will be something. It will be maybe not on point and maybe not on message, but at least you've produced it on time. And time is sacrosanct in some cultures, which means it's the resource that counts most for everything. You can, as long as you produce something, even if it's off point and it's on budget, then you have um, you have kept time, you have done well. That is a good worker. That is a good situation. That context is not African. If you produce something that is irrelevant, and then you produce that irrelevant thing on time, from an African perspective, that is detrimental. It can be, you can say, dangerous to our survival. You better produce something that is needed after the time that we had said, but it's needed, than to produce something that is not needed on time. This distinction is subtle, but what I want to emphasize is that in the African method, you have to be responsible about your delivery. You can't just say, because time has to be met, I'll deliver something or I'll deliver anything. You can't just say that. That's not being responsible. You have to know that Africans look at things holistically. So we'll look at the time, we'll also look at the message, we'll also look at the budget. And if you deliver something that fits into what we expect, then we consider you to have delivered. That means you take responsibility for the message, for the budget, and the time. You're accountable for it, and you make sure you deliver it in the way that I'm describing. So it's a bigger requirement. There's no safe hiding place. You can't suddenly say that, I've done it on time, that's good. But we don't need it. But I've done it. You set a new time, I'll do it again, something on time. So we can set a new one. You deliver something. Oh, we don't need that. You see, we no. To us, that looks like you're not responsible. It looks like you're not owning the moment. You have to own it. You see, otherwise, how are we talking? You know. So that's how I want you to view time. If you understand that, you can work with African clients. African clients, even if you come after the agreed time, but you come with something that people look at and say, hey, this is exactly what we need. This is exactly on point, and it's on budget. Then that issue of the time they were supposed to deliver it will be the time that you delivered it. Things will move, and this is acceptable. Now, maybe what I'm describing to you sounds like a strange way of talking about it, but that's the reality on the ground. So a lot about what you're learning will be about the ground game, how things actually do work, rather than how things should work. This is how they work. And with time, you'll come to understand these concepts through a lived experience, rather than me telling you. You'll have lived through it, so you'll come to see. You'll see clients who will tell you off for delivering something that is off message on time, and clients who will congratulate you and even give you a second chance because you delivered something on point and on budget, even though it was after the time. You'll see. And then when you're experiencing it, you'll have a lived experience of what I'm trying to tell you. So that's part of the whole thing. I want you to, in order to succeed, to be disciplined and also take responsibility and be held accountable for exactly what you're doing by way of message, by way of budget, and and that's it. You can also say by way of time. But remember, time is a moving object. So it's really the ownership of the message and the uh, budget that you need to be clear on. But we'll work together on that. And if you understand it, then at least you're on the same page. All right. So that said, from a work perspective, um, yeah, there was three things I needed to tell you, but I just don't remember now. But I'll move on to what I do remember. Is that in terms of your internship, you need to fill out your forms. So you need to start from today. Okay, this is the day of meeting. Um, there's a journal that you record on a daily basis. Okay, on what you've done. When you fill out the journal, you fill it out by writing what you have learned. Remember, your internship is working, but it's actually a learning experience. So you're learning how to work. That's what it is. So when you're filling out the journal, you need to write to what you have learned. Okay? And you're always learning. As long as you're working, you're learning something. But when you write it to what you have learned. So you avoid things that are not speaking to your learning. Because for even this experience to be suitable to a TUK student, it requires that the student is learning during the internship. And if you're not learning, then it's not a suitable environment for TUK students. You see? So when you write what you have learned, and from that perspective of learning. Now, sometimes you learn through discovery, sometimes you learn through experimentation. So even if you're exploring, discovering, you're uh, investigating, you're examining, if you're doing things like those, you write them as learning experiences, learning how to examine or investigate or something. But as long as you're always speaking to learning, then you're writing that journal the right way, right? It needs to be corroborated by a trainer. In this case, I'll be your trainer. I'll be your trainer because I'll be giving you the work directly myself. And someone else who I'll designate will be your supervisor. The supervisor is concerned with your professionalism. To like we'll be having weekly meetings, and you need to attend these weekly meetings. So there'll be a question on your regularity. Do you, for example, do you attend these meetings? And remember, it's not so much about keeping the time, it's about being timely. You have to make sure you synchronize the meeting with your supervisor, your trainer, and any other group member that is necessary for the work to be done. So those are weekly. Um, so your supervisor is going to make a weekly report on your form as well. Okay, and then comes the you can say uh, the standard form, the information forms that come with the journal. The information forms is straightforward. It has your contact details. It has the name of your course, everything that you're doing. You have to have that done. It's a cover sheet. And there's another one which gets into um, the nature of the work that you're doing with us. But that one is an assessment form. It's an assessment form that's filled by your supervisor or even your trainer. I can fill that out for you to now indicate um, the extent to which I find you're doing the work, you see, in terms of what it says on the form. So there's that form, but you have a part to fill. So you fill your part, then I, as your trainer and the supervisor, will also fill that part. But it's a cover form as well, it's information based. And then finally, there's an assessment form of the institution. That will be done by your assessor who will come. So for this internship, your assessor is going to be Eman. I will be your trainer here, and I'll assign somebody who will be your supervisor. Okay, and they'll fill in those gaps. But you need to prepare those documents into a single PDF. For us, we're digital, so we need you to make it into a PDF, and we will fill in the spaces within the PDF. So you simply share with us the PDF weekly, and then we'll fill in our bit and even sign digitally. Right? So you do your bit, we do our bit on a weekly basis. Okay? If you keep to that, then by 10th of September, Eman will come. We'll have a discussion. He'll assess, and he'll add in his assessment form into your book as a PDF, so that the following week, which will be the third week of, let's just say by the third week of September, you can hand in your book for with your grades. When you hand in your book, Eman will escalate your grades, and you'll now be put onto the graduation roll because 8 weeks is enough. But you can carry on with this internship. Okay. Now, let me stop there for now, and you can ask questions. If you have anything you'd like to ask, anything you need clarified, just let me know.
you've said the whole thing will be online, or are there instances where physical it will be required?
Yeah, the whole thing is online. If there are instances where we have to be required,
Mhm.
we have to meet physically, it will come out of our meetings. We'll all decide that we want to meet like physically, and then that will happen. But my preference is to do everything online these days. So it's not going to come from me that we have to meet physically. It might come from the client, and we may have to accommodate the clients if they want to do that. It might come from other group members, and I would accommodate them if that's what they want to do. But I would not myself be the one to suggest that we meet physically. It might come from you. If you want to meet physically, it's okay. You can also meet physically. That's okay. But it's not a requirement for your internship that we meet physically. The whole work experience is done online completely. There are different teams. Animation has like 4 teams running at the same time, and those 4 teams have different requirements. The animation team itself doesn't need to meet physically with itself. But the other teams, like let's say the sound design team, those ones need to meet physically often. So those ones meet physically. Then we have those ones do the voiceovers, they do the sound effects, and they do the background music, but they meet physically often. Then you have the team, which is the client. The client has their own team. Depending on the client wants to meet physically sometimes, not always, but sometimes. They impose it in different ways. They can say that you need to come and see our product line so that you can understand our product. So come to the factory, something like that. Or they might say that our first meeting needs to be face to face, so we sign off face to face. They can say things like those. So there are moments when the client wants it to be physical. Sometimes they want a physical presentation, so you have to go physically. So you can also appear for those. I mean, there'll be moments, there's a lot of physical interaction, but I don't initiate them. They're initiated by the client, the sound team, they have physical moments. Um, in some cases, the client um, requires workshops, physical workshops, where um, the work is generated with other groups. So we have the animation group, and then there are other groups who come in to participate in the production of, let's say, the story. Now I'm talking of the story. So that can happen. And if it happens, then I will tell you that now you need to be part of this workshop. But you'll be facilitated for that. You come for the workshop, you sit, you listen to what they're saying, how they're saying it, what is needed. And it's a big thing because the animation group is just one group, but there'll be other different groups and different people who are contributing to the story. Some are editors, some are writers, some are authors, others are they can be teachers, but they're knowledge givers. You find that they're all having some certain knowledge that they're bringing. Now, us as animators, when you're there as an animator, you're a visual storyteller. So you have to translate all that information into a visual story. But you'll be there as an intern. So you're also learning how to do this. All right. So that kind of workshop can be very physical, and I would be telling you that it's coming, it's on this date, and now you have to attend. But you'll be facilitated for it so that you can attend at not at your cost, but at the cost of the workshop. So that can happen. But um, the way the work is designed, the core work that you do, it's online. And when we meet and I give you the work, it's also online. So you find for most of what you have to do, like I'd say 95%, it's online. It's like that. But there are moments when it's physical. Okay. Feel free if you have other questions. Even if that one you need to ask again, you can ask again. Mm. Are you speaking? Chin?
I'm saying
Yeah.
you will still like talk more about the project and what you're required to do.
Yeah. So I can now move to that. So I needed you to understand your role in it in terms of tracking your own forms. I understand you have your forms. So
Yes.
you just make a PDF and then start filling them in and then let me have them when you've done 1 week. And then we proceed like that. I'll share it with the supervisor who will also record. The other thing
Okay.
is that your mind needs to, yeah, there were three things you need to orientate in your mind. Now I remember the three. So the first was that for us, it's very important you learn how to work in a team. You have to work by yourself, okay? But I'm assuming you're good at working by yourself because you've been learning like that. Now you have to learn how to work in a team. The teams in different jobs are different. They're not the same. Some people are the same, but people are different in different jobs. So your ability to um, enter into a group and then become performing within that group is something that is of great importance to us. That's what I mean by performing in a team. You need to learn how to do that. And then if you do that well, then you're meeting the job requirement. The second thing that is important in a job situation like this one is understanding how to how to tell your stories in a targeted way. So you're a visual storyteller as an animator, but your story is not for you, and it's not for me either. It's meant for an audience, and it's very important that you learn how to target your story. Now, there's a methodology to that to guarantee the outcomes. But if I was to tell you how it works in general, if you want to guarantee that your story is on point, is on message, you make sure that you involve the consumer who is consuming the story, because they will tell you when it's on message as you're doing it. So that's one. And then the other is that you work through um, a method that I will show you, and that method is geared towards implementing a message to the audience that you're speaking to. Most of the audiences we speak to are African, they're Kenyan. So how do you make sure that it's targeting that specific demographic when you're producing it? So this is a key element in being successful as an animator. Animation that we're implementing here is animation design. And design requires that you produce animation as a solution to some problem. So we're trying to solve problems, and these problems are communication problems. We solve them telling these visual stories. So, so that is something that we gauge you on. If you do well in terms of working as a team and then producing targeted messages, which are targeting the different audiences, then you're someone we can work with because you're doing that. Okay, it will come up. I mean, I'll keep on raising this thing. So I'm raising it now in advance so that you're aware. Yeah. The other thing that is important is working within budget, which I had mentioned in our talking. Um, Now, you're not responsible for budgeting, but I'll always give you restrictions or guidelines on what we can do and what we can't do and why we have to work in the way that I'm suggesting. The budget can sometimes allow us to buy software, but in most cases it doesn't. So we work with open source budgets or open source softwares, and it can also allow us sometimes to go and collect our own material, like photos if we need photos. But sometimes it doesn't. Many times it doesn't. So we have to work with what we get online and then draw from there. You see? But in all situations, I'd want you to work within our budget. We have small budget which we can always put towards getting things that we need. But you need to be budget conscious in the way that you work. So when I talk of finding solutions as a producer, I'm normally the producer of these projects. I'm very keen that whatever solution you're coming up with is something we can afford. It's affordable within the project. You see, if it's affordable within the project, then we can make some money from it. If it's not, then we end up losing money. And I want to limit situations where we lose money. Okay, so those are the three things that are key when you're working: to be mindful of budget, to be targeted in your messaging, and there's a methodology around that I'll show you, and then to work as a team. So there's a sense of interconnectedness you need to have in order for you to fit your work to fit into the deliverables of a team. Okay, so let's get into the projects then. Um, the projects are the projects that are on the table. Now, normally for you as an intern, you'd work on a project that has been processed by a director of animation. The director of animation will have processed the job in such a way that you'll have very specific instructions on what you have to do. And they'll be quite clear because they'll be documented and they'll guide you through it step by step. So that's usually what it is. But in any animation process, there are like 5 stages, right? There's the initial stage where you can say, we create the opportunity to animate. Okay, so that's a very delicate stage. Interns are not normally involved in that stage of things because it's delicate. But once the opportunity is there, which means we've signed and we have an LPO. An LPO is a local purchase order, or we have a contract. If we have a contract, then the job is on. Then we go into ideation. Ideation is where you'll be involved and you would participate in various steps, like in the research, in the storytelling, in, you can say, creating devices and drama. So we have to create the drama. And these things that we create should be animatable. So that whole discussion happens through brainstorming and research. So, you know, that's ideation. Then we move into the pre-production. So pre-production you're familiar with, where we start now. Um, the outcome of ideation is the script. So once we have a script, then our goal is to write a storyboard. That's what we do in pre-production. So we have the storyboard, we'll have the character models, the character poses. We'll also have the sound design. Sound will have voiceovers, sound effects, and background music. So we'll develop all that. But you're involved in this. You're involved in various ways, and then we move into the animatics. So that kind of ends pre-production. There are like 7 or 8 steps in pre-production. If you take sound as just one step, so there are about 8 steps. Once we're done with that, we move into production. You'll be involved in production. Production starts with pre-visualization and layouts. And so the layouts are usually done by even the pre-visualization is done by the director of animation, but the director of animation can involve you in pre-visualizing and then involve you also in doing layouts. But again, you'll be given step-by-step methods on how to do that. And then from there, we start with keyframing, in betweening, cleaning up. We go through that. And then we do the coloring. That's if it's 2D. If it's 3D, then it will be followed by, you can say, modeling, and then you can say there's also backgrounds design. So adding or designing the backgrounds, and then compiling, and then of course rendering. Rendering is like the same as coloring, but now rendering. And then we come to CGI. CGI is when we add the special effects, whether it's 2D or 3D. Now, once you do that, you've added CGI, then its production's over. You now move into the editing, which is post-production. So post-production will involve basically visual effects and editing the audio and the visual so that we have the synchronization. And then will come the first cut. We'll go for tests, second cut, more tests, third cut. That's what happens in post. You'll also be involved in post, but to what extent, I don't know. We'll see as we go. Okay. Now, that's a general thing. So it's the stuff you've been learning. And um, the clients that I see coming on board for July and August are, let's say, um, yeah, so I'll give you a brief for each one. But the first client is one that wants us to, well, the client wants to deal with the problem of littering in cities in Kenya, and starting with Nairobi. There's a problem of Generation Z littering the city, and they want to change this kind of perception amongst Generation Z. So for us, we want to produce what we would call transformative animation that will change the behavior of young people so that they see or they are sensitized about littering in the city. That's that's the job. That's the job. So I'll brief you on it specifically in terms of the stories, in terms of the you can say scripts, which we now need to convert into animations. Even storyboards, I'll give you some ideas. The channel we want to use for disseminating the information is TikTok. So, how do you produce a series of TikTok animations that will change the behavior of young people to make them stop littering Nairobi? That's the first job. Okay. But I'll brief you and I'll give you the role that you have to do, and we'll agree on the schedule so that you can start work on that. So that's one. Two is to do with an ongoing job. We have some ongoing work, so there might be some work for you on that, on backgrounds. But it's really working with 2D backgrounds. So I'll show you how to work with them. It's not really strictly 2D, it's 2D, 3D. So how do you work with 2D images in a 3D environment? That kind of thing. Um, but that is ongoing, so I'll explain it to you when I'm ready for that. Then comes now the third one, where we have educational material being produced for learning. This is motion graphics, really. But the motion graphics requires you to produce 3D objects which are animated according to some story. The story is given to you for the purpose of learning, and you need to understand the purpose so that you can produce the story, the motion graphics, to bring out, to enhance the learning. Yeah. So that's really what it is. So if you were to um, complete these, I think then your internship should be at least 2 months gone. I think maybe even 3 months. You know, and all of them you have opportunity to earn. I'll tell you about the earning through a contract. You'd have a contract which will specify the work and what you're being paid for. That will come along the way. Okay, but I'll start with the definition of work so you understand the scope. You have questions on this?
Not yet.
All right. So let me then end the meeting on this note. But you start filling in your documents so that you have them ready. I'm going to this evening put together the initial documents you need for the purpose of for the purpose of starting, and then we start right away. So tomorrow you can. I'll give you this information today, this evening. So tomorrow you can start the first activity, and then you keep tracking them as we go. Okay.
Okay.
So, so thanks for coming, Purity. Um,
Thank you.
yeah.
Hmm.
If you have questions, you can reach me on WhatsApp or email,
Okay.
whichever is best. And we'll be meeting at least once a week, but it can be more depending, but at least once.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.